The spinning bottle froze, pointing at Clara. "Dare," she announced, the word cutting through the party chatter. She crossed to Marco, straddled his lap, and kissed him with a raw, public hunger. Adam's casual smile dissolved into a mask of shock. "What the hell was that?" he demanded, the words snapping the air, leaving her utterly exposed. The bottle spun, a blur of green glass and light, then slowed. It stuttered to a stop, its neck pointing directly at Clara. Chad, who had been orchestrating the party games with a boisterous enthusiasm, grinned at her. "Truth or dare, Clara?" he asked, his voice ringing over the dying laughter in the living room. Clara felt a sudden, sharp prickle on her skin. She looked across the circle. Her husband, Adam, was leaned back on the couch, a casual smile on his face, holding a can of domestic beer. Then her eyes found Marco. He was seated opposite her, a dark shadow in the dim light, his whiskey eyes fixed on her. They held a challenge, a knowing invitation she hadn't seen in years, maybe ever. A tremor ran through her. "Dare," she said, the word a little louder than she intended, surprising even herself. Chad's grin widened. He leaned forward, enjoying the moment. "I dare you to kiss someone in this room," he paused, drawing out the tension. "Who isn't Adam?" A hush fell over the room. The air thickened. Adam's smile faltered slightly, but he quickly recovered. He probably thought it was a joke, a playful team, something to laugh off later. He always did. But Clara felt a different current. It was a live wire. She rose from her cushion, her gaze still locked with Marco's. The journey across the small circle felt like miles, a slow-motion walk under the spotlight of every watchful eye. She reached him. He didn't move, just watched her. His scent, something earthy and clean, wrapped around her. She straddled him, settling onto his lap, the slight give of his muscles beneath her. Then she leaned in. Their mouths met. It wasn't a polite peck, not a playful party kiss. It was raw, hungry, a silent explosion. The room went absolutely still. She tasted whiskey and something else she couldn't name, something wild. She felt his hands, large and warm, settle on her waist, pulling her closer. When they finally broke apart, the silence was deafening. Every face was turned toward them, frozen. Adam's face had gone from confusion to shock, then a slow, burning rage. The casual amusement was gone, replaced by something hard and ugly. "What the hell was that?" he demanded, his voice low but cutting through the dead air like a knife. He wasn't smiling anymore. Clara looked at him, then at her hands, feeling the weight of what she had done. In that reckless moment, she understood she had detonated her life. 2 weeks earlier, the first crack had appeared, a familiar one. Adam's voice had been muffled over the phone, the clatter of machinery in the background. "I won't make it home tonight, Clara. Anniversary dinner will have to wait." He hadn't sounded apologetic, just regretful, an inconvenience for him. "The Skyline project is imploding. They need me here." Clara stood in her kitchen, a half-cooked salmon fillet on the counter, the asparagus still in its plastic bag. 2 glasses of untouched wine sat beside the almost empty bottle on the dining table. The familiar sting of his absence was a dull ache. She hung up the phone. She didn't call him back. She just stood there, the quiet of the lake house settling in around her. "Looks like it'll be late nights for at least 2 weeks minimum," he had added before hanging up. "Maybe you should stay with your parents? The house can get pretty lonely." Clara, at 29, felt a regression, a sudden slide back into adolescence. The suggestion was a gentle push, a recognition of her fear. The lake house was beautiful, isolated, too isolated sometimes. The thought of 2 weeks alone in its quiet expanse, with only the sounds of the lake for company, was more daunting than admitting she needed her mother's presence. She agreed. She didn't finish cooking the salmon. Instead, she poured a glass of the Cabernet Sauvignon, then another. Eventually, she just drank straight from the bottle, the rich, dark wine a bitter comfort. The untouched dinner, the carefully set table, felt like a metaphor for her evening, for the way things had been for a while. Her parents lived in a quiet suburb, their house always buzzing with a comfortable, predictable rhythm. It was a stark contrast to the lake house. A few days after she arrived, her mother, a woman who rarely stopped moving, bustled into the living room. "Clara, dear, you must meet Marco. He's our new chef, an absolute gem." Marco emerged from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a clean towel. He was older, perhaps early 40s, with dark, unruly hair and eyes that held a depth she couldn't quite decipher. His accent was faint, European, like old coffee grounds. His hands, she noticed, were large and calloused, hinting at a life of tangible work. He extended one to her. "Clara," her mother said, "this is my daughter." He took her hand. His grip was firm, warm. It sent a surprising jolt through her arm. He didn't just shake it. He held it for a beat longer than necessary, his gaze direct. "The pleasure is entirely mine," he said, his voice low, a slight rumble in his chest. In his eyes, she saw something that made her feel desirable, truly seen, not just Adam's wife, not just someone waiting. That night, Adam texted a brief message. "Pizza with Mr. Miller. Sorry about dinner, babe. We'll call tomorrow." Clara stared at the phone. She thought of Marco's hands. She closed her eyes and saw his whiskey eyes. The smell of brewing coffee and warm, buttery pastry pulled Clara from her sleep. Her parents usually kept different hours, but she remembered her mother mentioning an early golf tournament. She padded into the kitchen. Marco stood by the stove, stirring something in a pan, the morning light catching the dark waves of his hair. The house was quiet, a rare occurrence. "Good morning," he said, turning, a soft smile touching his lips. "Your parents left a note, early start." They talked for hours that morning, over mugs of strong coffee and flaky croissants. He spoke of his quiet fear, a persistent worry that he was wasting his life, even as he built something new. He pointed to a thin white scar just above his wrist, a jagged line against his tanned skin. "A dog," he explained, a slight shrug. "Small and yappy, but fast. Taught me a logical respect for animals with sharp teeth and unpredictable tempers." Before Clara found herself listening, truly listening, in a way she hadn't with anyone in a long time. He placed a plate before her, perfectly scrambled eggs, dusted with fresh herbs, alongside crisp bacon and thick-cut sourdough toast. The flavors were simple but profound. As she ate, she watched him. He moved with a quiet efficiency, his hands deft as he wiped down the counter. For a moment, a genuine, unguarded flicker of joy passed over his face, a private satisfaction in the perfection of the meal he had created. It was a fleeting glimpse, but Clara caught it. He leaned against the counter, observing her. "Your husband," he began, his voice even, "he's still away on this project?" He didn't wait for her to answer. Too important to come home to his wife, apparently. Clara felt a prickle of defensiveness. The words were a direct hit, echoing her own unspoken frustrations. "He's busy," she said, perhaps a little too sharply. But then their eyes met. In that shared glance, something dangerous passed between them, a recognition of unspoken truths, of what-ifs that suddenly felt tangible. The air around them seemed to thicken. They spent the rest of the morning talking, the initial tension dissolving into a comfortable rhythm. They moved from food to travel, from art to music. Clara found herself helping him prepare lunch, chopping vegetables, washing greens. Her hands, usually accustomed to sorting through fabric samples at her small boutique, found an unexpected grace with a kitchen knife. He guided her, his voice low, his presence close. He told her his story. Leaving Spain after his restaurant, a dream he had poured everything into, had failed. The slow, painful climb back, building his catering business from nothing in a new country. His passion for food wasn't just it was the steady pulse of his life, a language he understood better than anything else. That night, Adam called, his voice rough with exhaustion. "Just got out of a meeting," he mumbled. "Everything's still a mess here." Clara found herself reluctant to mention Marco. The name felt heavy, charged with a significance she wasn't ready to voice. "Mom's got a new chef," she said instead, keeping her tone light. "Food's good." It felt like a small, calculated omission. Adam barely registered it. "That's nice, son." He was already distracted, his mind elsewhere. "Gotta go, Mr. Miller's on the other line." The call ended abruptly, the click of the phone leaving her with the familiar hollowness of his absence. But this time it was different. She wasn't just left with an empty feeling. She was already anticipating Marco's presence the next morning, the promise of his coffee, his quiet company. For the next 5 days, Clara adjusted the hours at her small fabric shop. She opened later, found excuses to leave early, to be home when Marco was in the kitchen. Their routine became a quiet anchor. Coffee, conversation, cooking together. A comfortable, unspoken intimacy grew between them, subtle as the changing light. On the sixth morning, Marco was slicing an apple for a tart, his movements precise. Clara reached for a small paring knife from the block, intending to help with some berries. Their hands collided, a soft brush of skin against skin. His fingers, warm and strong, instinctively intertwined with hers around the hilt of the knife. He didn't pull away immediately. They stood there, suspended, the metallic tang of the knife a strange counterpoint to the quiet thrumming between them. "This is dangerous," Marco said quietly, his voice barely a whisper, his eyes holding hers. Clara felt her breath catch. Her voice, when it came, was unsteady. "It's just cooking," she managed. He tilted his head slightly, his gaze unwavering. Was it? Clara knew she should pull her hand away. Every rational part of her mind screamed at her to create distance, to break the charged connection. But her fingers remained intertwined with Marco's, a stubborn defiance she didn't understand. His thumb, rough yet gentle, traced the line of her knuckles, sending a shiver through her. He leaned closer, his breath warm against her cheek, smelling faintly of citrus and spices. "I want you, Clara," he murmured, his voice a low rumble. "All of you." The words were a jolt, terrifying in their directness, exhilarating in their raw honesty. Her heart hammered against her ribs. This was it, the line. She finally pulled her hand away, the sudden chill of the air on her skin, a stark contrast to his warmth. Without another word, she turned and walked out of the kitchen, grabbing her keys. She had to go to her shop. She had to put miles between them. Later that afternoon, amidst the muted colors of her fabric bolts, she called Adam. He answered on the third ring, his voice already sounding tired. "Hey, hun, long day." He spoke of spreadsheets and deadlines, of endless meetings. When he finally said, "I love you, Clara," it sounded like an obligation, a phrase tacked on, devoid of real feeling. The emptiness of his words, of his absence, pushed her further away from him, deeper into the dangerous current she felt with Marco. A few hours later, her phone buzzed with a text message. It was Marco. "Still thinking of you." Clara stared at the screen, a strange mix of fear and gratification swirling within her. Her fingers typed a quick reply without conscious thought. "Me too." The next morning, she came down to a quiet kitchen. Her mother was already up. "Marco left early," she said, noticing Clara's unspoken question. "Big catering event out of town. Won't be back for a few days." A profound disappointment settled over Clara. Heavy and unexpected, the house felt empty again, but this time it was Marco's absence she felt. A week later, Adam still hadn't returned. The Skyline project had stretched on, morphing into an endless, shapeless entity that consumed him. Clara felt unmoored, adrift in the comfortable, predictable rhythm of her parents' house, yet utterly alone. She missed Marco's presence, the easy conversation, the spark. Then her phone rang. It was Marco. "Clara," he said, his voice a low thrum that sent a tremor through her. "Can we meet? Tonight?" He suggested a secluded lakeside park after dark, away from prying eyes. She knew what he was asking. She knew what she was agreeing to. A hunger she couldn't name, a yearning that went beyond mere physical desire, pulled her forward. She met him at the park just as the last sliver of twilight vanished behind the trees. His truck was parked in a shadowed spot, its engine already running. She climbed in. The air inside the cab was thick with unspoken tension, with everything left unsaid that morning in the kitchen. They talked, small, meaningless things, the weather, her shop, but the words were just a flimsy screen over the raw current beneath. He reached across the console, his hand gently touching her face, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. Their kiss was desperate, a release of pent-up longing that had simmered for days. It was urgent, all-consuming. "We shouldn't," Clara whispered against his lips, the words a faint protest she didn't truly mean. "But we will," Marco replied, his voice rough with desire, and the last shred of her resistance crumbled. He started the truck. "I know a place," he said, his eyes on hers, a silent question. She nodded, her throat tight. He drove out of town down a winding gravel road that led deeper into the woods, towards a hidden cabin she'd never known existed. The air in the truck was thick, charged with unspoken promises, with the inevitable. Inside the small, rustic cabin, their intimacy was immediate and consuming. The world outside, Adam, her life, all of it, faded into a distant hum. She tried to block it out, to exist only in this moment, in this raw, exhilarating connection. She found a freedom, a passion she hadn't felt in years, a feeling so potent she mistakenly equated it with love. It was a dizzying, intoxicating rush. They returned to her parents' house just before dawn, the sky a faint gray pink on the horizon. Marco stopped a block away, letting her out in the shadows. "This is our world now, Clara," he said, his hand lingering on her arm. "Our secret. No one needs to know." She looked at him, the quiet promise in his eyes, and believed him. The affair continued in secret for the next 2 weeks. It was a clandestine dance of stolen moments, hushed calls, and late-night texts. Clara's days were a constant battlefield, her profound guilt warring with an insistent, almost primal desire for Marco. Each lie she told Adam, each half-truth she offered her parents chipped away at her. Yet the exhilarating rush of Marco's touch, the way he looked at her, kept her tethered to the dangerous thrill. Adam finally returned home. He looked exhausted, lines etched around his eyes, but he carried a small bouquet of lilies, her favorite. He tried to reconnect, asking about her days, touching her arm as they moved through the house. Clara felt a sharp pang of guilt, a flicker of the old affection. But the ghost of Marco's touch, the memory of his lips on hers, lingered, making it hard to respond to Adam's tentative affection. Her answers felt rehearsed, her smiles strained. He sat beside her on the couch, running a hand through his hair. "I'm really sorry about all this, Clara. The project was hell. I know I haven't been around." He paused, searching her face. "How about we get away next weekend? Just us. A small cabin up north. No phones, no work." Clara hesitated, the image of Marco's hidden cabin flashing through her mind. "I'll think about it," she finally said, her voice sounding flat even to her own ears. In the background, Marco's catering business began to take off. He was getting more calls, bigger clients. He spoke of expansion, of new equipment. He seemed more ambitious, more focused. A subtle distance began to creep into their interactions. He was less available. His attention often pulled elsewhere. Clara started to see a harder edge to him, a man singularly focused on his own advancement. The initial charm, the intense gaze that had made her feel so desirable, now sometimes felt like a calculated move. Doubt, cold and unwelcome, began to creep in. Was this what she had traded her life for? One afternoon he mentioned a new contract. "Big party," he said, adjusting the cuffs of his chef's coat. "The Millers, their annual summer bash. High-profile crowd." Clara's blood ran cold. The Millers. Adam had mentioned them just yesterday, how important it was to be there. "Adam and I are going to that party," she said, her voice tight. "That's dangerous, Marco." He shrugged, a dismissive gesture. "Just means I'll be in the kitchen. You'll be in the ballroom. No one will notice. Plenty of staff." He didn't seem concerned, or perhaps he simply didn't care enough to be. The night of the party arrived. The Millers' sprawling estate was alive with laughter and music. Adam, in a sharp suit, was immediately drawn into conversations, mostly about work. He was focused, animated, talking with Mr. Miller and other important faces. Clara stood by his side for a while, nodding at appropriate moments, but she felt unseen, a prop in his professional landscape. The familiar ache of being overlooked settled in. Then Chad, the perpetual instigator, appeared with his bottle. "All right, everyone, time for a little truth or dare," he bellowed, his voice carrying easily over the din. The game began, moving swiftly around the circle of willing participants. Clara watched, a detached observer, until the bottle, spinning with a cruel sort of precision, slowed. It rotated, wobbled, then its neck pointed directly at her. "Truth or dare, Clara?" Chad asked, his eyes gleaming with mischievous anticipation. She felt a strange calm. "Dare," she said, the word clear, resolute. Chad paused, looking around, his gaze settling on Adam, then sweeping towards the buffet tables where Marco and his staff moved with efficient grace. "I dare you," he announced, his voice carrying, to kiss someone in this room who isn't Adam. A ripple of nervous laughter went through the crowd. Adam, standing next to her, chuckled, shaking his head. "Oh, Chad, you're a riot," he said, his hand lightly on Clara's back, assuming it was all a big joke. He leaned in, whispering, "Just a peck. Honey, let's get this over with." But Clara's eyes were not on Chad or Adam. They were on Marco. He was standing by the dessert display, a small plate in his hand, his back to the wall. His gaze was fixed on her, and a subtle smirk, barely there, touched his lips. It was a challenge, an acknowledgement, a silent dare that confirmed their forbidden pact. She started walking. Her movements were deliberate, each step a conscious choice. The conversations died down as she crossed the room, the hushed whispers growing louder. She reached Marco, who stood still, waiting. She didn't hesitate. She straddled him, her dress rustling as she settled onto his lap, her body flush against his. Their lips met. It was raw, undeniable, a kiss that devoured the air in the room. A gasp, then another rippled through the stunned silence. She could feel the heat radiating from him, the solidness of his body beneath hers. When they finally broke apart, the quiet was absolute. Clara looked at Adam. His face, which had been confused, then shocked, slowly hardened into a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. His world, she realized, was collapsing before her eyes. "What the hell was that?" he demanded, his voice icy, cutting through the silence. Adam didn't wait. He stormed out of the party, his footsteps heavy on the polished floors, bypassing the coat check, ignoring the stunned faces. Clara was hot on his heels, the whispers of the guests a tangible presence pressing against her back. The chill night air hit her as she stumbled onto the gravel driveway. His car, a dark blur, screeched out of the Miller's estate, leaving her standing alone under the harsh glare of the security lights. He was gone. The realization settled in, cold and sharp. She was stranded, with no ride, no explanation, just the echo of her actions in the silent, empty driveway. Numb with shock, she fumbled for her phone, calling for a cab. The ride home was a blur, the passing streetlights casting fleeting shadows that mirrored her chaotic thoughts. She arrived back at the lake house. It was dark, silent, and empty. A heavy stillness had replaced the usual comfortable hum. Her phone rang, startling her. It was Adam. His voice was cold, flat, devoid of any emotion she recognized. "Don't expect me back, Clara. Ever." The line went dead. She spent a sleepless night, the full weight of her actions crashing down on her like a wave. Every detail of the kiss, of Adam's face, replayed in her mind. The guilt was a physical ache, a tightening in her chest that made breathing difficult. The dawn, when it finally arrived, was a pale, joyless gray. She tried calling Adam repeatedly. His phone went straight to voicemail. She sent texts, desperate apologies, pleas for him to just talk to her. No response. The silence from him was louder than any shouting could have been. Then her parents called. Her mother's voice was tight with disappointment. "Clara," she began, the word heavy with unspoken judgment. "We saw it all." There was a pause, a moment of profound sadness. "How could you, Clara? How could you do this to Adam? He's a good man." Her father's voice, usually a comforting presence, was absent. The silence from him spoke volumes. Her flower shop, Bloom and Petal, usually a haven of color and fragrance, became eerily quiet. Word traveled fast in their small town, faster than she could have imagined. Friends avoided her calls. Acquaintances in the grocery store would look away, pretending not to see her. She felt completely isolated, an outcast in the very community she had built her life within. The vibrant world of flowers suddenly felt dull, lifeless. Her phone buzzed with a text message. It was Marco. "Are you okay? I'm sorry." A hollow relief washed over her, but it was quickly replaced by a surge of anger. "Sorry?" His casual tone, the distance in the words, felt like another betrayal. She tried to find him, to talk, to understand. But he was suddenly hard to reach. His catering business was booming. He was always out on events, always busy. He seemed to be actively avoiding her calls, her attempts to connect. The man who had once made her feel so seen, so desired, was now just a fleeting presence, an echo. Clara truly realized the depth of her loneliness. The profound loss wasn't just Adam, it was her entire life. her marriage, her reputation, her place in their small, interconnected world, all shattered. The cost of her choices was becoming horrifyingly clear. If you're wondering how a few reckless decisions can dismantle a carefully constructed life, stick around to the end to see how life's costly choices unfold. She started drinking more, the wine from the bottle becoming a constant companion. It was an attempt to numb the pain, to blur the edges of the crushing regret. The lake house, once a symbol of their shared life, now felt like a mausoleum. Each room echoed with Adam's absence, a constant, painful reminder of what she had thrown away. Weeks bled into months. The vibrant colors of Bloom and Petal, Clara's flower shop, seemed to dim. Sales plummeted. The small town's gossip, sharp and persistent, had done its work. Her once thriving business, a source of pride and independence, now barely broke even. The stacks of invoices felt heavier each day. She tried to reach Adam one more time, leaving a heartfelt voicemail. Her voice trembled as she spoke, pouring out her deep regret, her understanding of the pain she had caused, a desperate plea to just talk. The silence that followed was Adam's answer. Instead, his lawyer contacted her. A formal letter, stark and unyielding, arrived in the mail. Divorce papers. The terms were unambiguous, outlining the division of assets, the end of their shared life. There was no negotiation, no softening. It was over. Her parents came to visit the lake house, trying to offer a strained kind of support. They walked through the silent rooms, their presence feeling heavy, disapproving. Their disappointment, though unspoken, was a palpable weight in the air. Her mother, while helping Clara sort through old photographs, sighed. Adam always supported your shop, Clara. Remember how he helped you with the first loan? How he came every Saturday to help you set up displays? The words were gentle, but the implication was clear. Her ingratitude, her carelessness. Then Marco reappeared. He called, his voice now confident, almost triumphant. He had achieved some success. He was opening a small restaurant in the next town over, the Hearth. He suggested they reconnect, the word hanging in the air with a casual invitation, hinting at a future together. Clara felt a flicker of hope, brief and weak, quickly followed by a heavy dose of skepticism. She agreed to meet him for coffee at a neutral spot. He talked animatedly about his new venture, his ambition, his plans for expansion. He barely asked about her shop, about the wreckage of her life. There was a detached quality to him now, a focus so singular that she felt like a ghost sitting across the table. In that moment, Clara saw him clearly. He viewed her as a conquest, perhaps a temporary diversion, but certainly not a partner for life. She saw his opportunism, sharp and undeniable. He had leveraged her family's connections, her emotional vulnerability, using it all as stepping stones for his own rise. The realization wasn't an emotional explosion. It was a cold, hard fact settling in her gut. He had played a part in her downfall, but he wasn't going to be her savior. A few days later, a longtime customer, a kindly woman named Mrs. Henderson, lingered after picking up her order. "Oh, Clara," she began, her voice lowered. "I saw Marco the other day. At his new place. He was with such a pretty young thing, a waitress, I think." The words were delivered with a sympathetic frown. The betrayal stung, sharp and immediate, but beneath it, a strange sense of clarity emerged. It was a mirror of her own actions, a bitter form of justice. The sting, however, galvanized her. Clara looked around her struggling shop, at the wilting flowers, the empty spaces. This was her. This was what she had. She decided with a quiet resolve to focus all her energy on rebranding and rebuilding her life, starting with Bloom and Petal. She cut all contact with Marco. He was not the solution. He was another part of the problem. His absence this time brought no pain, only a quiet sense of liberation. Clara also started therapy. The first few sessions were hard, raw. She began to confront her deep-seated fears of loneliness, her patterns of seeking external validation, the reasons she had allowed herself to stray so far. The road ahead was long, but for the first time in a long time, she felt a flicker of genuine hope. Clara poured her energy into Bloom and Petal, creating unique arrangements that slowly drew new customers. The quiet of her lake house no longer felt empty. She learned to be alone, finding a new kind of peace in her own company. Months after the party, Adam finally contacted her, not for reconciliation, but to finalize the divorce. They met at a neutral coffee shop, the air heavy with their unspoken history and pain. He was composed, distant, and made it clear there was no turning back. Clara saw the man she loved irrevocably changed and accepted her responsibility for it. Her hand was steady as she signed the papers, a strange mix of sorrow and liberation. He wished her well, a polite but firm goodbye, closing their chapter. She heard Marco's restaurant was struggling. His charm wasn't enough to sustain it. She sometimes saw him, his ambition now tainted by a desperation she recognized. Clara reflected on the immense price she paid, her marriage, her reputation, the trust of her community. But in the ruins, she also saw what she had gained: self-awareness, resilience, and a deeper understanding of herself. The memory of Adam, her honeybee, the loving man she lost, lingered, a quiet reminder of the choices that led her there. One evening, sitting alone in her revitalized shop, she looked at a faded photo of her younger self with Adam. She closed the shop for the night, feeling the weight of the past, but looking towards a future built on her own terms. A quieter, stronger Clara emerging from the ruins. Clara found a renewed purpose in her flower shop, bloom and petal, creating unique arrangements that slowly attracted new customers. The quiet of her lake house, once a source of dread, became a space for solitude and self-reflection, where she slowly found peace in her own company. Months after the party, Adam contacted her directly for the first time. The call was brief, formal, requesting a meeting to finalize divorce details. They met at a neutral coffee shop, the air between them heavy with unspoken history and pain. Adam was composed, distant, his gaze unwavering as he reviewed the divorce papers. He made it clear there was no turning back. Clara looked at the man she had loved, seeing him irrevocably changed, and for the first time truly accepted her responsibility for it. She signed the papers, her hand steady, a strange mix of sorrow for what was lost and liberation for what lay ahead. Adam wished her well, a polite but firm goodbye, closing that painful chapter. She learned through town gossip that Marco's restaurant, The Hearth, was struggling. His charm and ambition hadn't been enough to sustain it. She saw him occasionally, his once confident stride now tinged with a desperation she recognized from her own recent past. Clara reflected on the immense price she had paid: her marriage, her reputation, the trust of her community. But in the ruins of her old life, she also saw what she had gained: self-awareness, resilience, and a deeper, more honest understanding of herself. She remembered Adam's affectionate nickname for her, Honeybee, and the loving man she had lost, fully confronting the choices that had led her there. One evening, sitting alone in her revitalized shop, the scent of fresh-cut flowers filling the air, she looked at a faded photo of her younger self with Adam, taken years ago. She closed the shop for the night, feeling the weight of the past, but looking towards a future built on her own terms, a quieter, stronger Clara emerging from the ruins.